Okay. I'd like to start the session of the defining the resilience. I'm Yoichi Takita, a senior staff writer of the Nikkei newspapers. Usually, I'm covering the macroeconomic area and finance, but today we should cover the very broad issue in the 1 hour. But I like to concentrate the idea of the resilience. Then in Japan, there is a very popular traditional sport, the sumo wrestling. The two small wrestlers fight within a ring, especially on the brink of the ring. Such a small wrestler should show such a resilience. So it can be very flexible, and such a flexible action is very important to fight the small game. Anyway, so the following discussion will be done in Japanese language. So the audience from the France or the other foreign countries, please use such a headphone.
So today, we will be talking about resilience and try to define this concept between us. As I mentioned earlier, it's not just about being strong, but there is a concept of flexibility, certainly within this concept of resilience. And today, we have 5 panelists together with us, and each of their specialized area, they are experts, and they will talk about what they're doing. And in particular, of course, in 2011, there was a great East Japan earthquake, and we have invited 2 students who are actually students in that region at the time, and we will hear from them about their experiences. So, resilience. Each of our panelists will speak about what resilience means for them. So, I'd like to introduce the panelists from the extreme left-hand side. We have Mr. Abe Shinichi, who is the Managing Director of Google Japan. He will be focusing on his talk on IT and how IT can contribute to societies and economies being more resilient. For example, after the earthquake, what did Google do? What role did Google play? I'm sure his talk will focus on this point. So let's start with Mr. Abe, first of all. Go ahead. Thank you very much. My name is Abe. I'm from Google Japan. I'm not the president. I'm actually the enterprise business division. I'm the managing director. I think you kindly introduced me as a president, but I'm not the president. So let me talk about the earthquake. Immediately after the earthquake, of course, everyone was very keen to establish the safety of themselves and their family members. So what happened immediately after was that it was very important for people to gain information about the safety and whereabouts of their family members and friends and loved ones. So, of course, telephone was an obvious means, but it was difficult to establish communication with the fixed lines or even mobile phones where there was serious damage. Although phone communication was not up and running, the internet was working. So if you look at our key search word, you can see that the internet was widely used. So power cuts were inputted as words, or evacuation. Those key words were actually used to carry out searches in the search engine. And at the disaster, people were obviously using the internet to try and gain information following the disaster. At Google Japan, we obviously thought of how we could help after this disaster, what we could do to contribute to the recovery efforts. And at a global level, we have an initiative called the Crisis Response. And we have this platform which we brought to Japan. And we actually tried to adjust the contents to meet the needs of the disaster that struck Japan in 2011. Just to give you an example of what we did, there was a mechanism called Person Finder. For those people whose whereabouts are unclear, this will help you to find or identify the whereabouts of this person. If they're in the evacuation center, you actually take a photo of the person, you send it to the server and send it to the cloud, and then 5,000 volunteers will actually input that information. They will create a database that can be accessed by people. And at the end, we had over 10,000 photos which were inputted, and 160,000 names of people were actually registered on that cloud. So people were able to try and access the whereabouts of their family members, their loved ones, their friends. And also, we used the Google Map service to try and assist people. The Honda, the car company, were also collaborated with us. We used the GPS data on cars. We actually collected that data on an anonymous basis, and we actually put that information on the map. So we could track the movement of cars, the Honda cars that have this GPS system in place. And looking at this map, it was obvious to people which roads were blocked, which roads could be accessed. And also, in addition, if you had photos of the scene, it was clear why the roads were blocked or why the roads were not accessible, etc. So, of course, this was obviously a big help to the reconstruction efforts. In addition, Google has a Gmail site, as you may know, and for the providing this to normal companies under the name of Google Apps. Using this system, we actually worked with a company called Poppins, who provide childcare services. We used this to try and identify the whereabouts of children and establish the safety of children. And we used the cloud and in real time to actually provide such essential information. There is a video clip that we have provided, and it shows some of the work that we carried out. So I hope you can show that. Thank you.
震災直後にですね、各保育施設の被害状況を把握する。
Immediately after the aftermath of the earthquake, it was necessary to try and establish a location of people. We fill in this sheet, and this sheet can be updated.
っていうのは最高水準のエデュケアと介護サービスで社会に貢献するっていうことを決めているんですね。ご利用者、お父様とかお母様たちの利便性、安心感、そして緊急性にね応える新しいサービスをどんどん作っていきましょうと、そういった中でもおそらくこのシステムによってご両親とのもう本当にマンツーマンあるいはそのオーダーメイド的なサービスをですねスピーディーにタイムリーに提供していくと、そこでシステムが必要になってくるということを考えています。
はい、今の事例です。
So looking at the example that you saw, at the various childcare centers will input the necessary information. The data information will be automatically collected, and we can send the necessary goods or supplies that are needed to each of the locations and establish also the whereabouts of the children, of course. So establishing the safety of the people affected. And as a next step, we thought, what could we do to help? Of course, the cities were destroyed as a result of the earthquake and the tsunami, and people's jobs were lost. But people want to start working, but they don't have the means to do so. So in order to carry out this reconstruction and recovery, some people had to acquire new skills, or they had to borrow these skills from people. Also, outside of the disaster area, there are some people outside who do have those skills, but they don't know how they can help and contribute their skills in a constructive manner. So with this situation, we actually launched an initiative, cloud matching. So we would match the people who needed the skills with people who had those skills. This is a service which connects people in terms of the skills requirements. There is an example of a sushi chef, and there's a short clip about this, which I hope can be shown now.
そうです。被災して最初はもうどこに向かったらいいのか、何をしたらいいのか、もうその日どう生きたらいいのかっていうところだったんですけど、気仙沼寿司組合っていうのがありまして、組合長である大政さんが横浜の友人の方からちょっと声をかけていただいて、気仙沼のものを全部揃えられないんですけど、お寿司を作って被災地はこうなんですっていう生の声を届ける。そこからですね、この形で呼んでもらえるのであれば行かせていただこうかなっていう、形ができた。 はちゃんとしっかりしたお店も作りたいし、ホームページもちゃんとやりたいっていうことで、ネットの重要性ももちろん感じてましたし、なのでしっかりしたものを作りたいって思った時に、じゃあ今こういうチームがあるのでそちらの方にちょっと相談してみたらどうですかって言って紹介されたのがモノサスさんですね。はい。
ウェブに関しても、ロゴに関してもそうなんですけど、結構お二人の気持ちがやっぱりちゃんとしっかりしていますし、なかなかいないと思うんですよね。ここまで人とのつながりをここまで表に出したウェブサイトって、そうそうないと思いますし、それだけじゃなくってサイトの中にあるんですけど、その道具についてのこだわりだとか、結構以前の新富さんのブログ、人のつながりがすごく見えるブログだったんですね。それを移管してこのウェブサイトをもとに発信していくことによって、感謝だとかありがとうとか、そういうような言葉が飛び交うような、そういった場になってほしいですし、そういうふうに使ってほしいなと思ってます。
やっぱりその震災を経験してで、本当に感謝しきれないぐらいのたくさんのいろんな温かい心をいただいたっていうか、ネットもそうですし人もそうですけども、つながりを大切に広がっていったらいいんじゃないかなって思いますね。
安倍さん、ありがとうございます。
Thank you, Mr. Abe. And I know it's a bit early, but having seen that video, I really feel like eating sushi now. Well, moving on to our next panelist, Mr. Koga. Well, Mr. Koga represents Rengo. He's the president of the Japanese Trade Union Confederation. So for you, Mr. Koga, for the workers at the workplace, what does resilience mean? Can you speak to us about that? Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. My name is Kobuaki Koga. I'm the president of Rengo. During the past 5-6 years, I believe we experienced two big changes. First of all, it was in 2008. There was the global economic and financial crisis, which started in the United States. And at that point, we had to rethink, what do we mean by the market economy? Or with the increasing globalization of our economies and our societies, globalization and democracy, can those two concepts really go hand in hand? We had to rethink these things. And of course, our organization represents workers, people who work. And what do we mean by work? So at 2008, with the global economic crisis that began in the US, we had to rethink many of these concepts. The second big change, the second big event, which I believe we'll be talking about in more detail later, is the event that took place in 2011. Of course, I'm referring to the Great East Japan earthquake. This was a huge event for us. It prompted us to question ourselves as to what is our role as people in society. We really had to rethink this, the ideas that we had in the past. And from this perspective, we actually started to look at some of the policies that were necessary. And also, we looked based on the concept of what does it mean to live as a human being in a given society? What should we be doing as people? And from this standpoint, we looked at the various policies in place to see whether they were correct or not. One important aspect is solidarity, helping each other, helping your neighbor. The other concept is fairness. So the third concept, which we thought was important, was discipline. fairness, and discipline, are they really embedded in our society? We looked at this. The fourth concept we looked at is cultivation and fostering, not just human resources, of course, but our society. Is it really a society that fosters growth, that leads people to grow? And the fifth concept we looked at was the concept of inclusion, not exclusion, but inclusion, including everyone. And based on these five concepts, five ideas, we really gave it a deep examination. And then based on that, what kind of society do we want? That's the idea that we examined. Of course, our organization represents workers. So with the concept of working, or the act of working, at the center, what kind of society do we want to create? That's what we started looking into. And we believe that everyone has a role to play. They can be a bridge for things. So we need a bridge between people, and we need a bridge between people and the society in which they live. And I believe this is what important in the lives that we lead. So with work or labor at the very core, what kind of bridges or connections do we want to establish with people and amongst people and between people and society? And based on this thinking, we arrived at this 5 bridges concept. I did prepare a slide. It's not up there. Oh, it is up there now. Well, this is the 5 bridges concept that I'm referring to. Of course, education and work, there needs to be a bridge there, obviously. Everyone has the right to access education, and education should provide a smooth pathway to work and to the labor market. And of course, as a bridge, it has to go in both directions. It's not just education to work or work to education, but within the work context, people still have to be provided with the opportunity to learn and to be educated. So moving between these two concepts, using the bridge to move between these two concepts, that's the idea here. The next concept is the bridge between family and the local community. And at the moment, there's a lot of talk about women's participation in society. I believe that this is another important bridge that we need to build. Of course, women have family responsibilities, looking after children or looking after their elderly parents or relatives. And at one given time, they might need to exit the labor market, but they need to be able to re-enter when they have that opportunity, and we need the bridge for them to do so. And of course, in Japan, the third concept is regarding the retirement age. At a certain age, people have to retire. It's a statutory requirement. But can there be can there be a bridge between work and these people? So allowing people to work as long as they like, that's another concept regarding the bridge. And also, even if people are very hardworking, working very hard in the society, because there are huge changes taking place in society, people may lose their jobs. They become unemployed through no fault of their own. And when that happens, we need a kind of trampoline, a trampoline that can lift people up, which will provide people with the opportunity to be educated and trained so that they can launch themselves into the next stage of their career and the next phase of their career, if you like.
And then the last bridge is the retirement and the bridging, building a lifelong active society. And we need to make adaptation to the new way of our engagement in the labor market. So these 5 bridges are the ones that we decided to establish as our activity pillars. So if we can create such a society based on these principles, we are able to create a resilient society. And the work means that it's our happiness, at the same time our hardship, that helps you grow, and then people connect, and then the society, the resilient society, will provide a medium of such self-growth opportunity. This is what we are purporting to achieve. Thank you very much. Koga-san, thank you very much. There are several important aspects highlighted. And now we would like to turn to the speakers from the Tohoku area, the 2 senior high school students, opinions from younger generation. We have prepared a film that they've created themselves that they would like to show to you.
On March 11, 2011, everything around us changed in a second. It was a nightmare. I could only watch.
The OECD came to offer support for Japan's recovery and revitalization. Around 100 students and their teachers from all across the Tohoku region came together for a workshop.
While your students design and plan their campaign to promote the Tohoku region to the wider world, they will be learning and acquiring essential skills in the process. The skills of leadership, of critical thinking, of cooperation, of creativity.
The OECD Secretary General challenged us to show the creative recovery of our region to the world in summer of 2014. Our journey began then. Last May, student leaders came to Paris to ask the mayor if we could organize our event to showcase Tohoku's recovery as a foot of the Eiffel Tower.
この公園でシャンドマルス公園でイベントを考えると思うんですけど、それをもう一回確認したいですか。
Je pense que votre initiative est forte et avec ce qu'elle représente dans l'histoire aussi de l'humanité peut vous apporter sa force, et bien Paris sera là.
The city of Paris gave us permission to organize our event in this world-famous place. We also gave presentations to French companies. We need international collaborators for the success of our campaign.
We are learning by doing, and learning through our mistakes. We had a rehearsal with falling dominoes to symbolize the waves of tsunami. Not all of them fell down. We also tested floating balloons at the height of the tsunami waves. This worked. We demonstrated the deer dance. Young people revived and gave new meaning to this traditional dance. When the earthquake hit my town, I was in my first year of middle school. I was about to go home.
まさかね、ここまで来るとは本当に誰も思ってませんでしたから、この向こうの崖のところですごいぬかるんでたんですけど、みんなもう登って、もう全然上がれなくて、もうそのまま流された人もいましたし、上に登った人たちがこう引っ張り上げてっていう感じですね。
校庭のあたりを友達とぐるぐるって回ってたんですけど、そこでちょっとフェンスのところにおばあさんの死体があって、それを見た時はちょっとあって思いました。やっぱそういうのはなんかここ来るとちょっと思いましたね。します。
In my hometown Togura, oyster farming is one of the major industries. But the tsunami destroyed almost all these farms. But our oyster farmers never gave up. They tried new ways to grow oysters. And after 2 years, the oysters came back. Before the earthquake, they were small and their quality was poor. After the earthquake, farmers spaced them out more. The quality is now better and they sell at higher prices than before. I am proud of this. our farmers found solutions to problems that existed before the earthquake, and I learned the importance of thinking differently.
ぜひ楽しくやりたいんですけれども、でもせっかくチーム1に入ったからには。I joined the OECD Tohoku School in my last year of middle school. I moved from Fukushima to Kyoto to go to high school. I started my new school life away from my parents. It has been 2 years since I left Fukushima. I started to see the things which I had not seen before. When I was in Tohoku, I wrote a letter to the Japanese ambassador to the OECD. As a Tohoku native, now living outside Tohoku, I have learned many new things and had many different opinions. This has led me to make some reflections. I feel that the term disaster victim does not simply mean those who survived a disaster, but over time becomes a sort of privilege. I was afraid that Tohoku could become like one of those places with disaster hill regions demanding subsidies and struggling to become independent. At the same time, whenever I heard Tohoku or Fukushima, I asked myself what I could do to help my region. The OECD Tohoku School was the answer to my question, what? Please help us, but please do not spoil us. We raised funds for the campaign ourselves. We did not take it for granted that we would get subsidies. We wanted to show that we can stand on our own 2 feet.
すっごいなんかいい意味でショックだったし、なんか全然知らない世界が見られた。普通に多分中学生高校生してたら関わらないじゃないですか。そもそもなんかああいうファンドレイジングとかもしたことなければ、なんか子供っていう保険があるから、まあ特にそんな苦労しなくてもお金もらえちゃったりとかっていうイメージがあったんですけど、でも実際全然そんなことなくて、妥協しちゃいけないとかそういうのを学んだような気がしますね。
Through this experience with the OECD, I began to see where I want to become.
なんかいろんな人にすごい当たり前のようにものすごいなんか手助けとか支援とかしてもらってるんですよ。なんかありがとうございますとかで言うと全然普通のことですよとかってさらって全然。だから私もなんかいつかてかもう大人になったら当然のことですよってさらって言える大人になりたいなって。
It's such an inspiring film. Our theme today addresses the resilience, which by analogy is bounce back of a ball. Instead of going back to where it was, we should strive for going even higher where it was, or pass beyond, or going beyond. I think your movie just taught us that spirit. Now we would like to turn to each one of them. You were talking about the oyster farm recovery program. Prior to the disaster, Tohoku oyster farm was suffering from quality because of the concentration of the farming activity. After the disaster, they adopted a new approach and improved the oyster farming. Can you go over how they achieved that? Good morning, everyone. My name is Oyama Kohei. I'm a student from Tohoku School in Japan. First thing I like to say to everyone is that when we experienced the disaster, we've received generous support from around the world. When we were in need of basic necessities, people generously sent those items to us, and then that was source of a great encouragement, and that has brought us to where we are right now. The resilience evokes to me as I live in Tohoku, and I think the hands-on experience was actually what it means to be resilient. As was explained in the movie, Togura, my hometown, used to be engaged in oyster farming, but it was with a high concentration of oyster farming, or the raft farming. The practice was, even before the disaster, viewed a malpractice, and a lot of people are calling for improvement. And then I think a lot of people were resisting to change, being selfish. And then finally, a tsunami struck our region. So the tsunami wave was as high as 25 meters. And it was a huge wave that swallowed us, literally. Even the rafts used in the oyster farms were flown away. And then people were at the end of wits as to what will be the next step they can take. But support from the NPOs, organizations, we've able to get to a start point of recovering oyster farming. And at that point, everyone decided that we should come together and be more cooperative, and then improve the raft oyster farming practice, so that nutrients will be deliver to each pieces of oyster, so as to improve the quality. Everyone was a little worried with new approach, because we were wondering whether this is going to be lucrative. But as we put that into practice, it turned out to be even better than what we thought, because it was even more efficient, more effective ways of farming oysters. So what was before the disaster suffered quality in oyster farming, but then stopping the old practice actually gave us a greater opportunity for more lucrative business with quality oyster, because the market price went up. So I think this is one of the examples of being resilient. We went back to zero, and then coming back to where it was, or going back to the old practice, doesn't mean anything, and we shouldn't do that. So this time, what was backtracked to negative has been recovered to a positive plus, with a new way of thinking. And from my viewpoint, that is one example of resilience. And this can be in the context of current Tohoku situation. We are still halfway through the recovery since the disaster. By adopting new approach, Tohoku can be recovered. I think this is very important to think this way, and I think this is a mission given to the young generation like us. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your such a valuable comments. Now I'd like to turn to Tsurumaki-san. You moved to Kyoto to attend high school from Fukushima. And then the mutual ties, or in Japanese we call kizuna, how you search for that connection. Can you reflect on how you search for the kizuna? My name is Yoko Tsurumaki. I'm a student from Tohoku School. I graduated junior high school in Fukushima and then moved to Kyoto to attend high school. I've witnessed a lot of things, and I felt a lot of dilemmas. After I moved to western part of Japan, and I told them I'm from Fukushima after disaster, and a lot of people expressed their condolences and sympathy, and they say, "What can I do for you?" A lot of people said that to me. And then they followed that because I was the victims of the great Hanshin earthquake that hit Kobe, the western part of Japan, in 1996. So I've been there. So I know this is what we've experienced, and then you were in my position many years ago. So what can I do for you? So these are the words, kind words, expressed by people in Kansai region.
Well, of course, there was the Awaji Kansai big earthquake that hit Japan. And those people who lived through that experience, I believe that they really showed resilience and they really learned how to stand on their own 2 feet. I'm sorry, I'm becoming quite emotional. I don't normally cry, but looking at the Tohoku region from the outside, and of course I am outside of the Tohoku region now, I don't normally cry. I'm called the Iron Lady, in fact, by my friends. I do apologize. Don't worry, just keep talking. It doesn't have to be a very long comment, but we want to hear from you. Tohoku is where I was born and raised, and I loved the area. But unfortunately, looking at Tohoku from the outside perspective, I don't think my region, unfortunately, is now standing on its own 2 feet. They are receiving a lot of subsidies. They are receiving a great deal of support and assistance. But are they independent? Are they really standing on their own 2 feet? I don't think so. People are receiving subsidies, so they're not working, and they're using that money to go to the pachinko parlors, to the games arcades. I've heard people actually doing that. 3 years have elapsed since the Great East Japan earthquake, and during the first 3 years, I did feel that I did experience a disaster, and when I spoke about that, of course people said, "Oh, what a disaster, what a tragedy you experienced," and of course people were very sympathetic. But 3 years have passed. 3 years after that, people in the Tohoku region, some people don't feel any regret or any remorse about using the subsidy money and spending that in the pachinko parlor. With that kind of people, can we really rebuild our region? I think it's not just a personal issue. I think it's an issue of our country. I'm sure that there must be different opinions about this, but my personal opinion is that some of the issues that we see in Japan, it's not in the Tohoku region, it's not just the issue that is unique to the Tohoku region. I think that these are some of the issues that are present in Japan nationwide. Is Japan really a resilient society? I'm not trying to criticize my country. I love my country. But because it's my country, I really do question, are we really resilient as a nation? And if we are told to become independent and to stand on our own 2 feet, I do feel that we don't know how to do that, or we don't have the means to do so. I, of course, am taking part in the OECD Tohoku School Initiative. There is a booth that is there, so I hope that you can take the time to visit our booth if you have a free moment. And also, as was mentioned in the video, to carry out this event, people in the project actually did the organization, the planning, and they took part in the fundraising. They did have to do all that for themselves. And through that process, they're learning not to be dependent on others. They're learning how to be truly independent, to stand on one's own 2 feet. Of course, this is an activity limited to the children of the Tohoku region, and it's limited to only 100 or so school children. But I hope we can spread this initiative to other parts of Japan and also to the outside world. And through these initiatives and by learning resilient, I believe that this will help towards the reconstruction of not just the Tohoku region, but our country as a whole. Thank you. Thank you very much for those 2 very interesting talks. And so, last but not least, I would like to ask our expert to speak. So from the United Nations, someone who's in charge of risk management and who's dealing with this in her everyday life, an expert in this field, I'd like to invite Ms. Margareta Wallstorm to give her comment. So please go ahead.
Thank you very much, moderator. And if you're so kind to call me an expert, I have learned so much from Japan over the years. So, and I think I'd like to just link everything that's been said now. Your question was, how do we prepare better? How, what do we learn from the many, many decades of disasters? And all the aspects that have come up this morning, information, access and availability about risk for basis of decision, the economy, and of course inclusiveness, and all these aspects. In fact, today I think it's fair to say that we, in fact, together have all the knowledge that we would require to become a lot more resilient. But at the same time, I think particularly in the richer part of the world, I think we are feeling more exposed and less resilient than ever. Our own vulnerability is increasing. Why? Well, I think it's increasing because we have built societies that somehow give us the impression of everything is predictable, that we actually can build stronger houses, that we can educate, that we have better and better cars, better and better ITs, and somehow this is all intended to reduce our exposure and vulnerability. What we haven't quite done is actually looking at the individuals. After 15 years or so, I went back to Kobe to ask people, looking back 15 years, what is it that has left the deepest wounds in you? And the 3 things they said. 1, we felt abandoned. Everywhere in the world, people in a disaster feel abandoned. Second thing, we lost our jobs. We never regained our economic capability. And the third thing was the social stress. Family quarrels, violence in the family, alcoholism, everything. Now, this is not a Japanese issue. This happens in literally every catastrophic event in the world. Social impact, economic impact. And I think there is a certain myth around that disaster recovery generates economic growth. There is very little evidence for that. Unfortunately, the long-term impact of disasters is negative for the economies of countries. Even if the boom of reconstruction creates a certain blip, but the longer-term impact is negative. And for some countries that are hit by disasters all the time. It lays a foundation for lost opportunities. So, but just to focus, and I'd like to link to really what Ms. Surimaki said, what Yoko said, and also the oyster farm proposal. I think any resilience strategy has to be built on resilient individuals. And one of the very important, one of the things that Japan is always doing is after each catastrophe, really looking at what did we do right, wrong, what can we change, improve, etc. And I have been talking a lot with people who are looking into education. It reflects very well also what I think Ms. Surinaki just reflected on. The early warning system in Japan is a critical model for the whole world, but it teaches people how to behave. It doesn't teach people how to think for themselves. This is not my words, in fact, it's the educators. So they are thinking, how do we make sure that we also leave the space in our education so that people feel confident in taking their own decisions in the crisis? Many of you have heard about the tragic events. You've heard about how many people rescue themselves. We just saw that. But you've also heard a few examples, very tragically, of schools that did not have the right guidance to take an independent decisions because lack of knowledge, lack of experience, waiting to be told what to do, and children and teachers perished. Now, what they are asking themselves, the educators now, what do we do in our education system to train individuals who feel confident to actually act on their own instinct and the immediate sense of risk in their own environment? So I think this is where we are now with resilience. I think we know how to build a strong building. Certainly in Japan, you have perfect track record of all the technology. But how to stimulate an educational system that reduces dependency on the predictable, but also stimulates individuals' own decision-making and creativity in managing the risk. The key message, I would say, from these past 6 years and quite what I've seen in many post-disaster situations around the world is the opportunity for recovering better, for bouncing forwards, as you said, is actually lost. Why? It's lost because we rebuild risk through rebuilding what we had. Resistance to change, I think, was one of the comments about the oyster production. And also probably because not full comprehension and recognition of how difficult it is to create change. In fact, you have to prepare to create change in the post-crisis situation. It has to be part of your plan and preparedness. What is it that would probably need to be changed? We probably know that quite well. So people at the center. Inclusiveness means, as just a final comment that I also got with me from Japan with talking with many people, young people, children, persons living with disability, women. And the children, many children said in Japan to me and everywhere, no one really listens to us. We are not part of the planning. We very quickly become victims to be helped, but no one recognizes that we have a role to play in the planning and the execution. We can also help. We are not just victims. The second comment, and there was a young boy, I think from maybe your school. He said once, if we must have tsunami walls, can't we make tsunami walls of glass so we can see the sea? I don't think any grown-up would ever think like that. So be careful, listen to them. The second point is very important for all of us. I think the president of the Deaf People's Association in Japan, because the death rate among disabled people was probably twice as high as the non-disabled. And remember that elderly people, we often become a bit disabled ourselves, so we all have a future as slightly disabled people. But this gentleman, he said, He said, you know, all societies in the world are designed to the model of an able-bodied man. So that excludes most of us, in fact, except some of you. But so his observation is really about the resilience. A society to be resilient really needs to include everyone in planning, preparation, execution, and also planning for the rebuilding for resilience, in order not to lose these opportunities that are really ingrained in people's personal experiences.
Thank you very much. 残り、
So this session is scheduled to go until 9:30. We only have a couple of minutes left. I did want to take time to have another round of talks from the panelists, but if we have any questions from the floor, I perhaps can only take one question. But if you could raise your hand, we can take a question.
Okay, so please identify your name and your affiliate, and please a very quick, short question, and please identify to whom the question is raised, please.
I'm from the American University of Paris, a graduate student, and my question is to the Director Manager of Google. How quickly were you guys able to update your maps and your road information after the disaster?
Thank you. So at what frequency, and with a certain time lag, we were able to update the maps? Well, basically, the data that we received, we were able to reflect that straight away in real time. We had that system in place. So we provide a platform which provides information, but the internet is not just a one-way gateway. It provides information, but it also is a means of providing information, sending out information, and receiving information. I believe that this is the same for the private sector, also for the government, being able to provide information in real time and using that information as needed. Providing such a platform is what we have done and what we want to continue to do as we move forward. Thank you very much, Mr. Abe. So I'm afraid it is 9:30. I don't think we really need to have concluding remarks, but if I can make one last comment, as I mentioned at the outset. So for society as a whole, to become resilient and to become persistent and tenacious. I believe that our panelists really spoke about these concepts. Can we thank our panelists with a round of applause?
Ladies and gentlemen, you are very welcome to stay in this room if you want to follow the keynote address by Ministerial Council meeting chair, because the room is already almost full. So if you want to follow this session, please remain seated.